My name is Gabrielle Wyman, and I teach fifth grade reading, writing, and social studies. And I chose a P21 project that has students do innovation and through the visual arts. So let's get started. The first thing that these students would need to do is to choose a folk tale that they are familiar with, that they enjoy. By the time that students get to fourth, fifth, sixth grade, which this project is aimed towards that age group, they are very familiar with many folk tales, whether it's fairy tales, the Three Little Pigs, which is more of a folk tale, doesn't have a lot of magic involved in it. Aesop's fables, that they are just very familiar with this type of storytelling, something that is not completely true to life. It's not realistic fiction, and there's aspects of fantasy that are added in. So first, they would need to choose a folktale, probably as a group that interests them in some way, and that they felt a creative connection to, and that they really were familiar with the characters, with the plot line, and all the conflicts that happen. Then, after the students had chosen the folktale, they would need to get their hands on as many different versions of this folktale as possible. So, for example, if a group chose Cinderella, they would not just want to stick with the original Grimm's fairy tale, which you see a cover for on the left, that there are so many different Cinderella stories out in the world today, just many variations. So, one I'm vaguely familiar with is The Gift of the Crocodile, and so just how Cinderella can kind of be retold different ways. So just reading as many different versions as they can, and that would be the goal there. And then they could also view as many different versions as possible. Everything from the classic Cinderella in this case, or if it was a different fairy folk tale, some sort of cartoon version, and then even live action, like the most recent Cinderella version that came out. But the goal would be just to view it in as many different ways as they possibly could, whether it's other students performing it on like YouTube or whatnot, just viewing what they could to get some ideas. Then the next part is what I find most intriguing. So what they would need to do is they would create their own adaptation. And here you see a picture of an older adaptation of what kind of the classic story of Hansel and Gretel. And this is probably what the illustrations that many of us had grown up with. So to use this example, they would take a story like Hansel and Gretel, a folk tale. They would set it in a radically different culture. So something completely outside of the traditional German forested setting and 1600s culture that we think of Hansel and Gretel existing in. They could also set it in a completely different historical period. So again, I just mentioned that Hansel and Gretel tends to be set in 17th century Germany, but taking it to even ancient times, or moving it forward into the future, or making it more nowadays time period would definitely be a huge change of historical period, or maybe even one that was fraught with conflict in some way, like the American Civil War. Or they could just completely take their adaptation, making that folktale more of a contemporary context, something that they might be more familiar with. And so, for example, they could take that old school Hansel and Gretel and turn it into something that is what you see in this picture here, where they're set in more of an industrial type place. Hansel and Gretel appear to be not the innocent children that we picture of our youth. You can even see like there's a hand coming out of the suitcase and whatnot, and the axe in the back. And so just different ways, some ideas that they could take their folktale and just make it new. Then the next part of the creative process would be to write their own adaptation, talk about, have a lot of conversations with them and throughout the writing process of how are you changing this folktale? How are you making it new? Then once they have written it, they would assemble a cast and they would perform their new adaptation of their folktale and how they have written it, probably keeping intact a lot of the original dialogue, but again, how they have basically changed the setting and made it completely new. And then after they have performed it a little bit, then they would video record it, which adds another aspect, another layer of complexity, because once students are video recorded, it definitely takes their presentation up another notch. Once they have finished the video recording, they would need to review, think about ways that they made creative choices and why they did that and how can they defend that and help other people understand. And then once they have reviewed their adaptation, and thought about the creative choices that they made, and then they would also take a chance to reflect. Did your story change? Did it stay the same? What parts of it remained intact and that anyone could recognize? Oh wow, that is that traditional folktale, and how did they make it brand new? And then these are my references, and thank you so much for listening today. Thank you.